Welcome to the Medical Manners Podcast, where I give healthcare providers simple tips for ways they can transform the way they connect with their patients and colleagues. Connecting with patients isn't some secret sauce that some of us have and others don't. They're just skills, implemented consistently over time. If you want to transform your medical practice, you're in the right place. I am Katie Wyatt, your host. This episode is sponsored by the Connect Better audio course. This course is for healthcare providers who want to drastically improve their patient satisfaction or Press Ganey scores. Each week for 6 weeks, you will listen to a 5 to 10 minute audio training. Then throughout the week, your job is to implement the skills you're taught in every patient encounter. You'll be amazed at how much your score can improve in such a short amount of time. Go to medicalmanners.com and use the code PODCAST for 10% off the course. Today's podcast episode is an interview with me and Liz Florentino. And Liz reached out to me. She had an experience a couple years ago where she felt that she had experienced some medical malpractice. And she pursued a lawsuit and wanted to talk about that experience, what made her want to pursue a medical malpractice lawsuit claim, and her experience through that. So I preface this conversation by the fact that I am not a lawyer. I have no law training, but I do think it's important for medical providers to hear from someone who wanted to sue a medical provider. It's important for us to hear why they wanted to do it and what's important to them as a patient in this process. So I hope that you can understand where this conversation comes from and that we can learn from it and try to do and be a little bit better. Liz, welcome to the podcast. I am grateful to have you here with me today. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your story.
Before all this happened, and when I say all this, I'm talking about my malpractice experience. I was a baker, and I worked for local restaurants for many years, and then I had my own little bakery. And so I had a home bakery during this time when I fell and broke my elbow. I had a terrible triad injury, and so I needed surgery. I was sent to a specialist. The surgery went okay, seemed to go well. I had an occupational therapist that I saw every 2 weeks for 3 months, and I was supposed to go see the surgeon for follow-ups every month. So I went for my first month follow-up, and everything seemed fine. I wasn't told otherwise. I was just healing from a broken elbow and working on getting strength and mobility again. And when I went in, he, without warning, without explanation, did a series of moves on me that were explained to me later on by another surgeon that sounded as if he was performing some messed up version of MUA, manipulation under anesthesia.
But you were not under anesthesia.
I was not under anesthesia.
Okay.
And wasn't told what was happening. So he grabbed me in a series of 3 blows, and I cried out for him to stop because he was hurting me. He didn't stop. And he didn't explain what he did. He told me that we're going to see what you're made of.
Okay.
And he said, no pain, no gain. Also, no pain, no gain. We're going to see what you're made of. And, people might wonder, why didn't I question him about what had happened? I was definitely in shock looking back. It became very clear by the next morning that what he did was very much not right. I was really hurt by the next morning, and the injuries started really taking shape throughout my entire body, head to toe injuries. So that was the beginning of my medical malpractice nightmare. And I started reporting to the hospital what had happened. I reported all up and down the ladder with the hospital and was referred over and over again to one man who was the risk management director. And I wasn't at the time, I didn't even know what that meant. That's where you go if you're going to sue. And I was looking for help, and I was looking for someone to tell me that the surgeon wasn't going to hurt someone else.
Right.
I was really concerned about that. I could picture him hurting an elderly person or a child or anyone else. And he did, in fact, hurt someone after me that I know of. And so it's possible that he's hurt even more people than that.
And Liz, let me ask you real quick. When you said head to toe injuries, were the manipulations he did full body manipulations? Or it was...
They were not. Actually, they were just my arm, but he would use so much force that it torqued my body. And I picture a wrung out dish towel.
Yeah.
Where it took, I'm still getting straightened out 4 years later. But the bulk of my getting straightened out was over the course of a couple of years and about 150 different appointments with doctors and physical therapists and various other medical doctors and mental health clinic also. So I was indeed truly hurt.
Yeah.
I was disabled. I couldn't work. I lost my home. I lost my mind to the injustice of it. I lost. So when you're hurt like that by someone that you trust and you're so vulnerable, there's just so much trauma that occurs from that. And I kept reliving it over and over also.
Mm-hmm.
Every aspect of my life was affected by what he did to me in those couple of minutes. And he works for a major hospital corporation, and I started reporting to them. It took me months and months and months to compile a complaint that I was told to turn in. They said, file a complaint. And by the time I did, nobody really read it. And I was told that he was working within his scope of work. So they were lying. They just ignored me and did not help me. That's a really long story. I actually wrote a book about my experience. It's called Angels, Bullies, and Brick Walls. And that's one of the brick wall systems that I refer to, is that I could not penetrate the hospital system.
Gotcha. You wanted what was done to be known, and you wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. Like you said, originally you weren't thinking, I'm going to sue. That wasn't your thought. You were just thinking wrong was done and someone needs to know so it doesn't keep happening. Am I getting that right?
Yes, that's just right. And I actually had faith in the hospital that they were going to help me. For about 10 months, called different offices trying to find the right person who could help me and take this man seriously to make sure that he wasn't going to hurt someone else. And there just wasn't that person. That did not exist throughout the entire hospital system. They just referred you right back to the risk management director, one person. And I reported all the way up to the president of this hospital and their leadership team, and they were absolutely silent and sent me right back to the risk management director. So in the meantime, I'm, going to many, many appointments to get straightened out while I'm trying to report this. And when I found out that they weren't going to help me, by that point, I found out that I had no legal rights either, that my rights had been watered down so much by tort reform that no lawyer would take my case. In Ohio, we have a statute of limitations of just 1 year for most cases. And in my situation, if I had won a case, it would have been capped at $250,000, which with that money, it just wasn't enough to get there and pay the lawyer fees and the court costs out of that. So no lawyer could take my case, and I was left to deal with it on my own. So like I said, I couldn't work. I lost my home. I lost my mind. And I went on to protest the hospital in order to try to save myself because I was so deep into the despair of it, into the injustice, that I couldn't handle it. Obviously, I survived it. I'm not against the medical community at all. I had the best doctors, the best care. No other doctors could have done what these doctors did to help me, I don't believe.
So you found a good team now that's been able to help you rehabilitate and get back
Yes.
so you can be on your feet.
Yes. So I just have some minor issues with it physically and emotionally. I've worked through a whole lot of stuff. It creeps up on me now and then.
Yeah.
And there are signs with me every day, all day, of where I'm at in life because of what he did to me. I'm still in the apartment that I had to move out of my house to go to, and I'm still trying to find a job in a different way because I can't do restaurant work anymore, or that kind of work that I used to do. So, there are signs everywhere and aches and pains every day that remind me. And so I've started coming at it from a different angle as a patient rights advocate. Like I said, this doesn't mean that I'm against the medical professionals. We need you guys.
Right.
We need you guys. And this was an abusive surgeon. I believe that most professionals are working to help their patients. But when things go wrong, we need help.
Yeah.
Not silenced. We need help.
Right. There has to be a way for you to be heard. I'll give you an example, Liz, and this is not even on the same level of yours, but I just mention it because it was a time that I was wrong as a provider, and I had the decision whether to say nothing or to fix it. And it was a very small case. It was a telehealth shift I was working, and I had a patient call in, and his wife, I forget the exact details, but his wife had been diagnosed with chickenpox, so with varicella. And they were both young, healthy. I think they were in their upper 20s. And her provider had given her, I think she had some more symptoms, and she had been given an antiviral. And so he called me and just said, hey, my wife got this antiviral. Do you think I need to be on an antiviral? And I don't even think he might have had a couple spots, but he had been immunized. He was a healthy guy. He had no risk factors. He was doing just fine with the varicella that he had. And I said, I've always learned that varicella is it's a self-limiting disease. It's a virus. You're young, you're healthy, you're handling it well, you'll be just fine. And he said, okay, cool. And so we hung up. And then I thought, man, why did they give his wife an antiviral? She's young and healthy too, So I got on UpToDate, which is like the medical Bible that has all of the up-to-date studies on it. And I started reading, and it does now recommend treating varicella even in adults who are doing well, because there's such a high risk of pneumonia after varicella in adults. And so I thought, oh, dang, I didn't tell him the right thing. And I thought I could just do nothing because he's 3 days into this. He's doing fine. He's not coughing. He's not short of breath. This guy's going to be just fine powering through this on his own. But I felt like I had told him the wrong thing, and I felt like I owed him that. And so I called him back on the phone and I said, hey, after I hung up with you, I just kind of got reading about this and I stand corrected. Really, the guidance now is that, an adult with known varicella, we treat with an antiviral. Anyways, he was totally cool with it. He was like, thank you so much for calling me. And I actually can't remember if he decided to take the antiviral or not. He and I had a conversation about pros and cons. And I can't remember what he decided, but I remember how good I felt getting off the phone, knowing that I had done right. I had corrected my error. And so I just feel like there has to be a way that you can be heard and the errors can be fixed, hopefully without lawsuit. Hopefully we can just be good people and like, okay, this was done that was wrong. Let's try to fix this. Let's try to make this right. Anyways, what are your thoughts?
Definitely. It is a matter of treating people decently. And I'm sure that your patient was so happy that you called back and, just out of your kind heart, you actually called him back, took the time, and he could make his own decision as an adult of what he wanted to do. And I thought many times that if this hospital had just said, let's have a look at what happened, let's see if we can help you, instead of go away, we're going to give you the runaround and we're going to pretend this never happened and you can go pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And obviously, a hospital knows about tort reform in Ohio. They knew that they were untouchable. Even knowing that you're untouchable as a provider doesn't mean you shouldn't acknowledge your injured patients. It would have gone so far with me because truly it was the injustice of it. The injuries were severe, really severe, but the injustice of it is what almost killed me. I became so obsessed with it and I was so exhausted by it. And I have come across other victims who I recognize this right away in them too. They just want that acknowledgement. I don't think that most people want to have to spend years and years trying to get to court and do all of that paperwork and legwork, and so you're right. I don't even think that most people need to end up in court.
They just want the wrong to be acknowledged and righted. And as I review medical malpractice cases, almost every single one says exactly what you said. I don't want anyone else to be injured the way I was. Like that is kind of the driving force of a lot of them. Okay, so if I'm understanding you right, and I am by no means a lawyer, so for what that's worth, this is not legal advice, but this is coming from a patient. It would have been so meaningful if the hospital would have said, come in and let's talk about your experience and let's maybe talk to the doctor and just see what went wrong and how we can fix it. It would have been meaningful for you to be acknowledged and at least the option explored something went wrong. Is that right?
It is right. And the first place that I called, and it took me a full week to report it because I felt so awful and I was so traumatized by it. It took me a solid week to call it in. And the first call I made was to the office of the surgeon and talk to the office manager. So she assured me there would be a meeting, and we left it at that. A week later, nobody bothered to call me back. I had to call them back to say what happened, and they said, we can't tell you. I said, why hasn't anyone called to check in on me to see how I'm doing? And she said, well, sorry. I was just left to assume that they had taken care of it and that was it. So yes, from the very get-go, they didn't acknowledge what happened. And so I don't even believe there was a meeting. Maybe there was a meeting, but nothing came of it.
Gotcha. And if I'm hearing you right, I think I'm all about primary prevention, right? If we can stop a problem before it even starts, then we don't have the problem. And so as I'm looking back on your case, it would have fixed the problem completely if the doctor would have said, I have some maneuvers I'd like to do on your arm to see if we can loosen things up, or whatever his goal was with it. So I'm going to be doing some of these maneuvers. If any of these cause you, it may feel like it's stretching or uncomfortable, but if any of these cause you excessive pain, please tell me to stop and I will. That would have solved the problem, right? Just that little bit of communication.
Yes, there was no, I guess you'd call it informed consent. There was no informed consent, no, explaining what he was going to do. And so I tensed up, which didn't help with with the wreckage through my body. I tensed up and made, I'm sure, what he was doing twice as bad as if I had tried to relax doing it, which I couldn't have anyway. The force that he used on me was so inappropriate and unprofessional. And so I've never been in a car accident before, but I feel like maybe it's akin to,
that's what it felt like.
Whiplash, total whiplash from head to toe, and I ended up with ulnar nerve entrapment on my whole entire right side, which was where I had the elbow surgery also. And on top of that, CRPS. So chronic regional pain syndrome on top of ulnar nerve entrapment, on top of healing from surgery from a broken elbow. It was unrelenting, excruciating pain for a very long time. It didn't have to be like that. But like I said, he was an abusive surgeon. Most surgeons or most doctors wouldn't do what he did. But a lot of doctors and surgeons don't fully explain what they're going to do or what they might do or what the options are. So that's very important. Communication with a patient is really key to preventing confusion and injuries. And a lot of things can be prevented just by communication, making sure that your patients know what's going to happen and what it might be like to have done to them. Yes.
Well, and I'm thinking, you mentioned informed consent, and there's certain procedures we have to get an actual signed informed consent for, and there's certain that are not. So it sounds like this is one that did not need an actual signed informed consent, or he didn't get one. But I still think it's useful to almost treat anything you're going to do to the patient as if it's an informed consent, which means you explain what you're doing and what the possible benefits are of doing that and the possible risks. You might be sore for a couple weeks or whatever. And then you also explain the risk of doing nothing. So, or we could not do these maneuvers and you may take longer to heal. We may lose a little range of motion. I don't know. I don't know the exact maneuvers he was going for. But in my mind, that would have been helpful to almost treat it just like we do a normal informed consent. And then you, as an adult, can say, yeah, I think that is something that might be good for me. Let's go ahead and do it. Or, you know what? I really feel like I'm healing pretty well. I worry about the soreness or the injury that may come from this. Could we see what another 4 weeks of occupational therapy looks like and discuss it again next month, And you could have had that discussion with him.
Yeah. There was no discussion.
It just happened. It just... Oh, I'm so sorry, Liz. I wish we could go back in time and change what was done, but I love that you're willing to talk about it. So at least moving forward, we can do better as healthcare providers. Is there anything else that would have been meaningful to you as a patient that we can try to improve on as healthcare providers?
After all of that, I started going to other doctors, of course, to get the care that I needed. And one of the first doctors that I saw was a surgeon, And he started off really well with me, was very kind, asked for permission to touch me, to examine me, and was really great bedside manners. And he's the person that I learned that I had CRPS from, which I'd never heard of before. And he said, "You have CRPS. Look it up. You'll see all of your symptoms there online." So I did. And what I saw there was that it's incurable, which my doctor actually has alleviated almost all of it in my body at this point, I want you to know. But I read that it was incurable, that its nickname is the suicide syndrome because it's so painful, that amputation is usually the cure because it's so
Oh my
painful.
gosh.
I saw horrible pictures. So this is what I'm seeing. I have all the symptoms of it, and it's spreading on to what's called mirroring, to my other hand. So anyway, please don't expect your patients to go to Dr. Google to find out their fate. And, Google is helpful for some things. So maybe even warn them, like, if you look this up, this is what you're going to see. But I believe that we can help you. I believe that we can alleviate these symptoms. Those are some scary images you're not going to want to see. But from him, I also went to a pain medicine doctor who was verifying that I had CRPS. And I asked him, I said, "How much do you know about CRPS?" And he said, "A lot." And then he left. And so truly the only place that I got information from was online. And the symptoms were horrific. So it wasn't just the one doctor who sent me to Dr. Google, but also, this other doctor who knew so much, but he didn't tell me anything. Communication with your patients. Understand that we don't know what's happening. That's why we're coming to you. We need help. We're hurt. We're scared. We're in pain, a lot of things, and traumatized on top of that. Not always, but a malpractice patient would be traumatized. And there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
So show your compassion. Doesn't take long. I don't expect you to spend, an extra hour with me, but within your appointment, just a little extra encouragement and communication would be really helpful.
Yes. Well, and when you Google things, you're always going to die or or be there's this huge spectrum on so many conditions that it would have been really helpful if they said this can manifest in a broad spectrum sort of way. Typically the way we see it is, A, B, and C. And maybe giving you a little bit of hope where, we've seen it like this and we found that these things can be helpful. So communicating, educating, and then providing a little bit of hope and not just go Google
Yes.
it and figure it out. It's so interesting. I interviewed on this podcast a guy named Dan DeKester, and Dan in his 20-somethings had testicular cancer. And he's a super smart, well-educated guy. But when I asked him what healthcare providers could do better, he said all my healthcare providers were good about asking me if I had any questions. But he said, I honestly did not know what questions to even ask. I'd never experienced cancer. I'd never experienced testicular cancer. And so he said, I really wish they would have kind of guided me through, like, what questions should I even have? These are some things you might need to look for. These are some things you might experience. If you do, it's totally normal. These are things you may experience. If you do, call us back because we don't want to see those. And so that was his advice that I thought was really good advice, is not just saying, do you have any questions for me? But especially with a new diagnosis like yours or like his, kind of guiding our patients through those questions.
That's so true. And I actually written that down, but I didn't talk about it. But so I'm with him, tell us what questions we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And definitely you're our guide, unless we do go to that Google search. It's so helpful to have your opinion and your guidance and your support because you're the one that we're coming to. And rather than enhancing those fears within us, to offer the hope, like you said, can go a really long way. One of my doctors who worked on me for a solid year after I was injured, he's the one who alleviated the CRPS and the ulnar nerve entrapment and millions of other things. But he said, and this doesn't sound too hopeful, but it turned out to be, he said, oh, you're going to heal, but it's going to take a long time. So he was being honest, but to hear that he believed that I was going to heal when I didn't believe, I didn't know if I would heal.
Yeah.
I held on to that,
Yeah.
that hope.
And even giving you a time frame is so helpful, because if in your mind you thought, okay, he can help me, I'm going to be better in 2 weeks, even though you knew it was going to be a long road, at least then you knew what to expect. And you weren't discouraged when weeks and weeks go on and you're just seeing little improvements. You're like, okay, that's okay. He said it was going to take time. I can keep doing this if I know there's like a light at the end of the tunnel. So I actually love that he said that.
I did too, because then I did start noticing, even like you said, those little tiny improvements. Okay, I'm actually healing,
Yeah.
It's helping me.
Liz, I told you before this interview, I don't like slinging mud. And so you and I agreed, and you've been so gracious not to mention names. But I would like to know the name of the awesome doctor who has helped you in your rehabilitation, just in case anyone in your area is looking for someone who listens and who will work with people.
Dr. Coppinger.
Okay.
Dr. Imber Coppinger. And what they do, they are DOs.
Okay.
DOs who do osteopathic medical manipulation. I think I might have the words wrong, but OMM. So if anyone listening to this has CRPS or ulnar nerve entrapment, I didn't have anything else done other than their manipulations to alleviate those things that normally don't go away or don't go away without some kind of more invasive treatment. They just work at such a fine-tuned level. A DO who does OMM. Yes, that's what you need.
That is so good to know. Thank you so much for being willing to talk about this. And I really do hope that by you sharing your voice, we all can become a little better and hopefully keep this from happening to other people.
Thank you. And you too. The work that you're doing is so important to all of us on both sides of the patient and, bridging the patient and doctor relationships. It's great what you're doing. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I truly believe, like you said earlier, you need us. We need you just as much. We don't have a job without you. And so I think sometimes we forget that we need each other, and we just need to work together to make it work. So anyways, thank you, Liz. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, the best way to support what I do is by rating and reviewing the podcast. Your feedback helps me reach more listeners to make an even greater impact. It would also mean the world to me if you would share it with a friend or colleague who you think could benefit from the topics we discuss. Together, we can transform the way we deliver healthcare by transforming the way we connect. Take care.